So, what are we talking about today? Turning back to today's topic, NAICS codes versus PSCs, government contractors deal with NAICS codes and PSCs every day. These codes are a key factor in determining if an opportunity is a good fit for a company. But where did they come from? Why are there two of them? And what do they offer to industry and governments? On today's docket, we'll go over what NAICS codes and PSCs are and why they matter. We have also reserved some time for a live Q&A, so please send any questions to us through the Q&A function or chat box, and we will address them all at the end. I'll now turn it over to Amber.
Thank you, Haley. Okay, so we have a poll for everyone. And before I even announce this code, we want to see how everyone pronounces this, because truthfully, here at the polls, we've had a few disagreements. Okay, so we need you to help us settle this. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll on how do you pronounce this code? NAICS. How do you pronounce it? If everyone could just give us a second, give us your answer. We'll go ahead and end it in a minute. I see I'm losing. I know Amanda and Lisa and Haley are laughing, but there's two out there. Okay, everyone that pronounces it like I do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and end this poll real quick. So sharing the results. Everyone pronounce it as NAICS. Okay, I happen to say NAGS codes, which I understand is possibly wrong. And Amanda has gotten on me about that. So I need everyone to forgive me. I'm going to be breaking a decade-long habit of pronouncing it as NAGS. And if throughout this presentation, I happen to slip up and say NAGS, I need everyone not to throw tomatoes at me. Okay? All right. All right. So moving on to our polls. Moving on past the polls. All right. So we're going to be talking about NAGS codes. So what exactly is this? This is the North American Industry Classification System, better known as NAICS or NAICS, which classifies goods and services by their production processes. Usually that is based on the production process of the final step or of the joint production when more than one production process is involved. So every NAICS code has 6 digits, and they all have a specific meaning. We made this nice little graphic here to kind of break it down for you and show you. The first 2 numbers is a 2-digit sector code. The third number is your subsector code. The fourth number being your industry group. The second to last number being your NAGS industry, and then the last number being your national industry. And we'll kind of go through what that means. But this method essentially divides the economy into 20 sectors. Then products and services are further classified into over 1,000 industry codes. These codes are updated every 5 years, with the most recent update being last year in 2022. All current codes are listed in the U.S. Census Bureau website and can be found if you just buy a simple Google of NAGS code manual. So why were they created? Various forms of this type of classification system has been created back to 1938. As you can imagine, statistics, everyone that works in economy has tried to wrap their hands around the production process of American companies for a really long time. But in 1997, OMB replaced the standard industrial classification, or better known as the SIC system, with NAGS codes. So you might see, just as a disclaimer, on some federal websites that still, or even documentation that still reference SIC system. And that is the same thing as the NAGS codes. That just may not have been updated. Believe it or not, you can definitely still find it on some federal websites. So when you see that, just think that just hasn't been updated and those are your NAGS codes, not to get them confused. So who is responsible for making this happen? The U.S. Economic Classification Policy Committee, or the ECPC, Statistics of Canada, and the Mexican National Institute of Statistics and Geography collaborated on a project to make sure the data would be comparable with other North American countries. So this was mainly for trade and economy analysis. This initial project also involved the Department of Agriculture, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, Energy Information Administration, better now known as the Department of Energy, and the Federal Emergency Management Administration, for FEMA. Because as you can gather, a lot of this was due to production in support of things like wars or building of reconstruction based on bills or things like national disasters. So that's why a lot of these specific agencies were included in this type of creation before. But I want everyone to notice a lot of these are production companies for materials or food or things like that, not so much services, which is something we're going to touch on in a little bit. But today, NAICS codes are used to collect and analyze data on the US business economy uniformly. It's a single conceptual framework that depicts production relationships between inputs and outputs, and it's typically used for administrative, regulatory, and taxation purposes. So how are they used in our industry? How are they used in federal contracting? So federal procurement acquisition professionals select the NAICS code that best represents the purpose of the product or service being acquired. Now, it's this purpose that leads to miscommunication between the federal space and industry. And we included a nice little example. If anyone is familiar with Anna Ehrman out of the Department of State, she is a wonderful advocate for industry that shares a lot of these insights socially and also provides them on her own social media website. So I actually pulled an example from one of her writings from 2017 that is completely still applicable to today, to give you an idea of what this purpose and how it leads to this miscommunication. So just a quote from Anna. If from a federal procurement perspective, if you're building, i.e. if you're constructing a data center to support a mission to Mars, it actually might be coded as a data center, not as a construction NAICS. This is because it's a lot easier for your customer to track the expenditures and justify to Congress an expense that is aligned with the mission versus just a purchase for the back office. So what do I mean by that? As we mentioned on the left here, that's because federal buyers are buying something for their mission, right? That mission is linked to an allocated budget item from a larger funding source or a larger bucket of money, if you will. As we mentioned in Anna's writing, it's easier for federal agencies to justify expenditures to Congress, which they are required to do, if they are aligned with the mission versus what they're actually buying, i.e. this data center is for the Mars mission, it's not construction, right? Because that's harder to explain to Congress to line up with their budget items. Also, NAICS codes are primarily important when it comes to determining qualification for size standards or small business set-asides, registering a business in SAM, and subcontracting limitations. So what does the data tell us about NAICS codes today? So we just went in and wanted to provide a little context of what are the top categories from FY18 to FY22. Obviously, one of the most important and the most critical ones and the most popular ones is for manufacturing, followed by professional, scientific, and technical services. But you'll notice that this includes the NAICS code of 541519, which is often a catch-all for IT services. And we're going to talk about these catch-alls and kind of how they screw up the data trends within the government when we also talk about PSC codes towards the end. So I'm going to hand it over to Haley now to talk about these PSC codes.
Yes. So before we get too into it, we have another poll question for you all. This is just the second one. There it is. So what is the difference between an FFC, a Federal Supply Classification Code, and a PSC? Is there no difference, or does DoD use one and not the other? So we'll give you all a second to answer. They're all coming in now. Oh, pretty evenly split. Give it a couple more seconds. There's still a couple more people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is actually very interesting. I'm glad we asked this question.
Yes.
Okay, give everyone about
a
second and we'll go ahead and I'm gonna end the poll.
Okay, so they're very evenly split there, 5, 6, and 5. 31% said there is no difference. 38% said DoD prefers FSCs, and 31% of you said DoD uses PSCs. Well, drum roll, please.
Okay. Oh,
There we go. So product and service codes are the same thing as federal supply classification codes. These are codes designed to describe what the federal government purchases, and PSCs have three broad sections: R&D, IT services, and products. So for those of you who answered one, there is no difference. You were correct there. Good job, guys. I also learned that myself during this process too. Before we go any further into the nitty gritty here, I want to point out a little grammar thing. Like technically we say NAICS code, but PSC includes the word code in the acronym. You'll hear people say PSC code or NAICS without the code. It's all interchangeable, interformal in this. I do it myself all the time. I'll probably do it today as well. Also, we tend to spell out PSC code, but not NAICS, probably because there's no nice way to pronounce PSC as a word. I just think that little grammar tidbit's interesting since we use them together all the time, but like the grammar is like opposite in them. But getting back to PSCs, the key attributes of PSCs are the nature and types of services, supplies, and equipment, the manufacturing level, like where in the process of getting from raw materials to a completed end item is it, its intended use or application, like air, land, sea, space, and more newly, its environmental attributes. Is it energy efficient, bio-based product? Is it considered environmentally preferable by GSA? And if multiple products and services are being bought, the contract or task purchase order will be classified using the code with the highest cost. So there can't be multiple, you just get the one there. There are nearly 3 times as many PSCs as there are NAICS codes. There are over 3,500 PSCs and 1,000 NAICS codes. These numbers come from USA spending. You might see conflicting data numbers elsewhere. It is somewhat difficult to nail down the exact number since both systems are updated regularly and the transitions take some time to take effect across industry and government. So just a little disclaimer there. But because there are more PSCs, this allows for a more granular PSC designation than NAICS code designation for a given contract. Similar to NAICS codes, the federal government revisits and updates these codes every 5 years. The most recent one was last year in 2022. There's the PSC manual maintained by GSA that lists all the existing product and service codes, and the Procurement Committee for E-Government, or PCE, is the deciding final body on any changes. We have another little graphic for you. PSCs that begin with a letter A through Z are for services, and those beginning with a number 1 to 9 are for products. So that's a really easy way to know what you're looking at right away and know if that's like your group or not. The first 2 digits identify the group number, and the second 2 are the class group. The code numbers are assigned to make it possible to expand the number of groups and classes as necessary. So they're really being prepared for all the updates in the future and what might come. In most instances, gaps have been left within each group to permit the insertion of new classes in logical sequence when necessary because of technological advances or to accomplish other desirable additions and changes, like PSCs ending in 99. Miscellaneous PSCs ending in 99 are often selected as the default codes rather than the exception. To support data integrity and prudent business decisions, acquisition professionals are encouraged to use miscellaneous codes sparingly since they are vague and do not supply adequate information or purchase types and categories. So why were PSCs created? In the 1970s, the federal government developed the PSC classification system using a centralized database like FPDS. PSCs categorize federal purchases using more than 3,500 4-digit codes. Today, PSCs are also used to map spending into the 10 common government spend categories and the 9 defense-centric spend categories. The common spend categories are on the right here for facilities and construction, professional services, IT, medical, transportation and logistics, industrial products and services, travel, security and protection, human capital, and office management. In doing this, PSCs provide insight into spending habits in each category and facilitate category management within a department. How are PSCs used in federal contracting? PSCs are very critical to the federal government professionals as they assist leadership with the data they need to compile legally mandated reports examine existing trends in federal spending, link procurement systems to contracting and financial data, and focus on market research and contract reporting. On the industry side of it, PSCs help communicate to federal buyers what service or product you provide with more clarity and make your vendor profiles on SAM or any additional marketing collateral more engaging. It's also important to note that PSCs are essential in generating a national or NATO stock number, NSN, as the first 4 digits of an NSN are PSC. NSNs are an essential part of the military logistics supply chain used in identifying, managing, moving, storing, and disposing of almost every item or material imaginable. What does the data tell us about PSCs? Very similar to how we did the NAICS codes data. These are the top PSC categories. I'd like to emphasize that they are categories, not the specific 4-digit codes. Looking at it in categories, we found provided a better overview of what the government is purchasing and what categories are utilized the most. If we had looked at like the exact 4-digit codes, they'd most likely all come from the top category, IT, which wouldn't have given us as clear of a picture there. And also the numbers in the graph are in billions on the side there. So IT has seen about $500 billion in the last 5 years, followed by support services, R&D, office management, IT and telecom services, operation of government-owned facility services, medical services, construction of structures or facility services, maintenance, repair, rebuild equipment services, and industry products and service are all the top categories.
So Haley, just something I want to note before we move forward is if you note the discrepancies between the top NAICS codes and the top PSC categories, right? And we're going to talk about why both don't interchange in a second. But I want to note, right, the top NAICS were construction-based and materials, whereas the top PSCs are an IT product. So just something to note when we kind of, the next few slides, we're going to jump into these fallacies in industry, but something that I would really like our attendees to remember. Great. So that leads us right into why does this matter? So we're going to debunk a few fallacies that are within industry because these collections of numbers and letters confuse even the most experienced vendors. Not going to lie to anyone, when we're doing this lunch and learn, I think everyone on the Pulse team learned something new. I definitely did. And I know Haley mentioned she did as well, because they are confusing. And truthfully, there's a lot of miscommunications and misconceptions about what these codes are, how they are to be used, and how they're used on either side. But truthfully, it's because each taxonomy, as I mentioned, is used in a unique way when it comes to the federal government versus industry at large. We both use them on either side of the table differently, in exact opposite ways. It's a very interesting dichotomy. And I wish I could go back and explain why that's happening. But to each federal government professional, these codes act as the first central search filter as they comb through around 380,000 vendors to support the requirements. To you, the federal contractor and your organization, they are critical in determining if an opportunity is a good fit, and at times if you can even compete. So it's important to really understand these and what they're used for. So as I mentioned, because there's a lot of misinformation on how these codes are leveraged in government, we want to go ahead and talk about a few fallacies that plague the industry, and are they true or false? Now, if we really want to take a lot of time, we would set up polls and do all that, but we figured we'll give you the answer straight. So the first thing is that specific NAICS registration in SAM is required for contract award. Raise your hand if you ever heard that you have to be registered in SAM under that specific NAICS code in order to compete and go after the award. So you're scrambling right before you submit because you realize that you're not actually registered under that solicitation's NAICS code. And right, you got to go ahead and wait for that SAM update to happen. I have definitely been in those shoes. But truthfully, that is false. Most federal opportunities have a corresponding NAICS code associated with its formal listing. It is a common misconception on both sides of the table that to qualify for a contract award, a vendor must be registered in SAM with the NAICS code associated with that solicitation. But legally, you don't. This is in GAO's decision in High Plains Computing, or HPC Solutions, back in 2014, and was further substantiated by the Veterans Electric GAO decision in 2016. Now, we knew we were going to rustle a lot of feathers when we brought this up, but it's important to note that there is actually precedent and case law supporting against that. The second one is that these codes are related when they're assigned. This is also false. NAICS codes are used for economic analysis, whereas the PSC system is designed intentionally for acquisition methods. There is no crosswalk between NAICS codes and PSCs, as I mentioned before when I pointed out with Haley, the top buys within the area, neither of them cross-reference really. PSCs can be referenced against any number of NAICS codes, and there can be multiple codes related to a contract. But if numerous products and services are bought, the contract or task order will be classified using the code with the highest cost, as Haley mentioned previously. These code systems are obviously not perfect. There are also mistakes such as human error, assigning the wrong code, a code not identically matching an industry or product. And these errors can cause discrepancies in what a code means. However, you can always appeal a code assignment if you suspect a code misrepresents the solicited work. There's also a really great tool that we didn't mention here that I want to give to all of our attendees. That's called the PSC selection tool. You can go ahead and just put it in your Google machine and it will pop up. It is used by DoD to help them decide which PSC is the best one to allocate that work to. So it's also really great for contractors to use when you're trying to figure out maybe if there was a misalignment in the code assignment for work that's being constructed, or if you're trying to decide what types of PSCs you want to put on your SAM profile or your marketing collateral. A few more are the NAICS codes are for services while PSCs are for products. This is something that I actually used to say a lot, which is completely incorrect. So this is false. We as an industry incorrectly defer to NAICS codes as services and PSCs for products, but that's just simply not true. NAICS codes represent the purpose of the product or service being acquired, while PSCs represent the product service that is being obtained. So think of it as the what, right? As we covered earlier. The last one we want to touch on is that NAICS codes are best when researching federal spending trends. This is also false. And to me, this is kind of, everyone has probably their own opinion on this. So this is maybe a true or false, depends on how you look at it. But it's been long taught in business development lessons that NAICS codes are the best tool to filter and identify contract opportunities and trends. And trust me, this is also something that I was taught when I came in industry. That's wrong. No one knows how it started or who started the rumor, but this has established NAICS codes as the favorite in industry. Conversely, NAICS codes are barely relevant from the federal perspective, except when it comes to small business designation or competition. PSCs are critical to the federal government, however, and while they may be an inadequate way to understand purchasing, which is a conversation for another day, it is how they primarily conduct market research. So putting this all into why should you care? Whatever the difference, both these codes are essential to any vendor's contracting existence. Both of them in their own right literally define your organization as they serve as the first introduction of your offerings to all federal buyers and the general market. Every organization must be well versed in both codes for a successful working relationship with the federal government. Using each accurately gives you, the federal contractor, more chances to be seen while expediting your search for correct federal solicitations. Haley, back over to you.
Yes, thank you, Amber, for that super important context and setting the record straight. And thank you to our audience members for listening. We will get to your questions in just a minute, but as a reminder, only Pulse Insider and SME members are able to access these slides and the recording after the presentation. So if you're interested in becoming a member, please reach out to us. And these are our upcoming lunch and learns in March, NDAA, in April, GSA schedules, and May is federal procurement tools and their functionality. These are all free to attend live. You can find the registration links on our website, or feel free to email us for that too. If you'd like to sign up, the links are on our website, but again, you can just contact us directly. Another shout out to today's sponsor, New Access Innovations. Thank you again. And if you are interested in sponsoring a future lunch and learn, please reach out to us. So we have reached the end of our presentation. Thank you all for being here with us today. We're now able to answer any questions that you may have, so please put them in the Q&A or chat box. I believe we have one in the Q&A right now.
I was going to say, so I see a question. Are PSCs going to be replaced by the National American Product Classification System? So I don't know enough about the National Product Classification System in order to answer that adequately or give the right answer to that. What I can give you is just my anecdotal evidence is that the federal government has taken a painstakingly long time just to update the PSCs and cross match them to category management, which seems to be an initiative that is sticking. So in order for them to then update to that new system, they would have to go through that practice again. So if it were to be replaced, I think it would take a very long time with an industry for that to happen. I'm not saying it won't. I'm just saying I think it would take a lot of time, a lot of work for that to happen, because that's, again, the government having to revisit their cross-referencing to track their spending. So I hope that answers your question, Jennifer. Were there any additional questions? I saw maybe some hand raised. We unfortunately don't have volume for the attendees, but please put your questions or comments in the chat. Happy to take them. So we just had another question that says, which does the government report to OMB, NAICS, or PSC? PSC, right? Yes, typically PSCs are used to do the reporting to OMB, and NAICS are kind of reported to census and the statistical agencies to look at that. NAICS are also used when working with OSTABU offices and the SBA, again, because that is used to make small business designation and competition decisions. And Jennifer, thank you for letting us know. If anyone is interested in the NAPCS, it recently came out from census. So if you want to take a look into that, I definitely will be doing that after that. So thank you, Jennifer. Okay. Any additional comments or questions? Okay. Well, with that, we'd love to give everyone back a little bit of their time. I hope everyone enjoyed this lunch and learn with us. I know I learned a lot. I hope everyone did as well and got a good takeaway from that. Haley, thank you so much for leading us in this lesson today. And I hope everyone has a wonderful day and rest of your week. Thank you guys so much for joining the Pulse. Thank you.
Thank you.